Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things COVID. We discuss three crises on this show: the health, financial, and racial inequality crises. We're always looking for guests and theme suggestions. Please email me, sree@sree.net. SREE@SREE.net. Tonight, we have a very special show for you. You get to meet Simon Tam, author, musician, speaker, troublemaker, relentless fighter for justice, world record 13 TEDx talks, and founder of the Slants, who won their case against the US Patent Office at the Supreme Court in Matal versus Tam. How many folks do you know who have a Supreme Court case named after them? You know one now. Please follow him on Twitter at Simon the Tam, SIMONTHETAM. Please follow him and connect with him. You'll meet him in just a minute. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and we want you to share this with your friends and family. Tag them. We know it's a Saturday night in America, but tag your friends. They can watch later. We have folks watching from around the world, and we're grateful for all of you for being here. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree, and I'm grateful to all of you. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. I'm also the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto is very simple. Don't cancel or postpone your event until you talk to us. Help us help you make your virtual event come to reality. And don't even think about it without talking to us first. You see my email address right on the screen, sree@sree.net. If you're new to us here, we want to tell you a little bit about this show. This is our stats after the first 125. We had 1 million plus viewers, 88 million social impressions, 234 guests from 48 cities and 13 countries, and that was 11 shows ago. We've had doctors, nurses, authors, journalists, musicians, CEOs, founders, teachers, professors, but the first time today, we have a Supreme Court case winner who has his name on a Supreme Court case. We are brought to you in partnership with Scroll.in, one of India's leading news, information, culture websites. Check out Scroll.in. And you can find all our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet. Our producers are Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please tag them, please follow them, and please see the incredible work they've done. We've been live for 136 straight days. 136. It's sometimes hard to believe that that's even possible. We haven't taken a single day off. Someone I know congratulated me on my work, thinking this is my full-time job. This is a full-time job, but where it is not. We are able to do this because of the support of all of you. And to everyone who said that this show has been a lifeline, for everyone who said this show has been helpful to you, you should know that this show is my lifeline, and this show is helpful to me. To have thousands of people every night tune in and be together has been very, very special. We're going to thank our sponsors, and then we're going to bring on Simon. In the meantime, let me tell you about the show we did last night. We did a show on Netflix, Indian matchmaking, and oh my God, it was a crazy night for a crazy show. We had Smriti Mundra with us, executive producer of the show, and Oscar-nominated director of St. Louis Superman. And Vyasar Ganeshan was with us. He was on the show, and people loved him in Netflix's global hit, a top 10 show on Netflix. We have other great shows coming up this week. Tomorrow night is Positivity Night, where we try to be positive if we can, and our guest is Jamie Metzl, founder of One Shared World, technology futurist, geopolitics expert, and sci-fi novelist. Please join us. We call it Positivity with an asterisk, because we're trying to be positive despite every rotten thing happening in the world. And then on Monday night, we go back to Portland in crisis. This time we meet Bernie Foster, publisher of The Scanner, the leading publication for African American folks in the Pacific Northwest. He will be with us, as well as other guests. So please tune in 9 p.m. on Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. in Portland. We did a similar show earlier this week and had a terrific response on a very problematic situation. As you know, federal officials, federal stormtroopers, federal troops are going into Portland and are in the middle of attacking peaceful protesters. And we talked about that, and we'll be talking about it again on Monday night. All right, let's thank our sponsors, because without the sponsors, we would not have a show. So first, we want to thank Muckrack Academy for creating the resources for me to create Fundamentals of Social Media, a free certification course for anyone who wants to get better at social media. More than 4,000 people have taken it, and you get a certificate at the end of it, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Please take a photo, share this with your friends. You know someone who wants this course, who needs this course. Please share this with them. We also want to thank our friends at the other show we do, She's on Call. This is a show starring my good friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. And they look at what's happening in the world of medicine and health, and they have an entire back to school episode running tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. Dr. Heather Kloss will be here, an infectious diseases doctor at Temple. Dr. Sally Goza will be here, the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Think about that, folks, how amazing that you'll get to speak to her, and to Dr. Donna and registered nurse Donna Mazik, who is the executive director of the National Association of School Nurses. I can't think of a more timely show. 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow at She's on Call. One more show to tell you about. Every Sunday we read aloud the Sunday New York Times for 5 years like crazy people. And tomorrow we'll be reading it out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Anthony DePalma, legendary New York Times reporter, writer, foreign correspondent, with a focus on Latin America, Mexico, and Cuba. That's 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And we have 2 more ads for you, and then we're done. A new sponsor for us, Nunbelievable, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each box of handcrafted cookies provides 2 meals to those in need. So please take a look. You get 20% off with the code SREE, S-R-E-E, 20% off. Please sign up at nunbelievable.com. Divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each box of handcrafted cookies purchased provides 2 meals to those in need. And our final sponsor for tonight is here.
Hotstar Premiere Nights. Watch the year's biggest blockbuster streaming straight to your screen, exclusively on Hotstar.
Hotstar Premiere Night kicked off this weekend with the world premiere of the new film Dil Bechara, starring the late Sushant Singh Rajput, with new music from Oscar winner A.R. Rahman. Streaming free on the platform right now. Hotstar brings you the newest Indian movies with subtitles, plus entertainment, cricket, live news channels, and much more. Hotstar.com/US. Make sure that you or anyone who loves Indian entertainment have a chance to check out Hotstar, and this film is now available free at hotstar.com/US. All right, are you ready for Simon Tam? Simon's going to be with us in just 1 minute. There you see Simon's author, musician, speaker, troublemaker, relentless fighter for justice, world record 13 TEDx talks, founder of the Slants, who won their case against U.S. Patent Office at the Supreme Court in Matal versus Tam. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, my friend, the incredible Simon Tam. Hi, Simon.
Hey, so good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for being here. My first question to every guest is, how are you? Where are you? How's your family doing through this crisis?
I think it's a complicated question. It seems like these days, the "How are you?" question always has all these kind of contingencies. But for the most part, I've been doing pretty well here. I'm in the middle of moving from Nashville, Tennessee, to Cincinnati, Ohio. So things have been a little bit chaotic, a little bit busy, but things on the whole are doing pretty well.
Well, we're glad to hear that. Tell us one thing about Nashville that people would be surprised to know.
It's not all about country music, and it's actually a little bit more diverse than one would think. A lot of people have all kinds of stereotypes about the South, but it's actually a very, very lovely place with extremely friendly people, and it's quite diverse, in both in taste of the taste of music as well as its people.
That's great. And so, what's taking you now to Cincinnati?
Well, more affordable living for one, but also because I'm going to be joining an organization called Strive Together. It's an organization that kind of coaches and convenes best practices with nonprofits across America to provide better racial equity outcomes as it comes to serving children in public education.
That is so important that you're doing that, very timely. So how can people find more out about this?
You can go to strivetogether.org to learn more information about what the organization's doing. And I think at this time, it couldn't be any more timely. I mean, there's so much happening in terms of the conversations that people are having and how do we serve students in the midst of the COVID, like what schools ought to be doing and how the practices of whether to open or not, how they can disproportionately impact families by race as well as by their economic levels. So we're doing some really, really amazing work in that area and sharing a lot of best practices and elevating the stories of people who are impacted, who oftentimes don't get to have their voices heard.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I'm so glad to hear it. Tell us a little bit about your own work in Nashville. How did you decide that this is the right moment to move on and take up this great new challenge you're taking on?
Well, I mean, Nashville's been great. It's like I said, I've really enjoyed living here for the past several years. But, as I was kind of looking at opportunities and thinking about kind of that next step in my career, and as there's just been this incredible momentum in terms of the conversation around racial justice in America, I realized that I just wanted to find more of a role where I could jump in and kind of be more active in terms of using my experience, my skills, and kind of like all the connections I've built over the years. Obviously I've spent a lot of time touring and speaking on behalf of my band, the Slants, and we focused a lot in that intersection of arts and activism. And I thought, well, where else can I lend use to these, everything I learned, and what kinds of organizations are out there? Well, that's when I discovered Strive in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I thought this would be a perfect fit. So that's kind of what brought on the change, and I'm really excited. Cincinnati is an amazing city. It's thriving and growing, and so I also got to say I miss decent dim sum because Nashville, we don't have any.
No dim sum restaurants in all of Nashville, but terrific other kinds of food. I know that the closest I've gotten to Nashville is Chattanooga. I was there on February 6th or so. One of my last trips will now, I hope, last for now, right? I hope in 2020, I'll be able to travel again. And if I do, I'll be able to say that I went to some other place other than Chattanooga as one of my recent trips. And I actually had a great time in Chattanooga. The food was terrific, and everybody said you've got to go to Nashville and Memphis, and they're on my list, and I hope to get there one day.
Chattanooga is incredible. It's a lovely place, but I will say that if your travels take you to Cincinnati, please let me know. We'd be more than happy to host you there.
Well, we'd love to come. I've been to Cincinnati, and it's a place that kind of looms large if you were a young kid growing up in America in the early 80s because of WKRP in Cincinnati. The show and the theme song was something I always remembered. And I went back and watched the show on YouTube and such, and I was like, I can't remember what the exact fascination was. What they were fascinating characters in there, and they were a media company. It was WKRP was, I guess, a fictional radio station in Cincinnati. And we also, one of the things you'll learn is how close Cincinnati and Kentucky are. Basically, the airport is in Kentucky, isn't it?
Yeah,
The other way around. I forget. Yeah.
In fact, it's so close to the town that's right on the other side, Covington, Kentucky, where I actually have a little rental property there. We can actually walk to Cincinnati, just cross a footbridge, and takes about 10 minutes, and you're in a whole other state. So
nice. So let's tell us what we're looking at here. This is the website of your band. So let's talk about that first, and tell us about your colleagues.
So this is the Slants. A lot of times people call us the world's first and only all Asian American dance rock band. It's a group that I started in 2006. I can't believe it's been that long. But it was a passion project of mine where we got to just, write and perform music that kind of reflected our shared ethnic background. As being all Asian Americans, we kind of had some similar experiences growing up, even though each of us grew up in very different circumstances and places across the country. We also were kind of bound together by this idea of like having pride for our identity. When we started in 2006, this is before Facebook or YouTube had its prime. Everyone was on Myspace, and it was so difficult to find any Asian American artists because certainly no one was really in the mainstream media, that we decided to kind of put ourselves out there and to provide a bold portrayal of our culture. And so our touring and music over the years have kind of really involved both the music aspect as well as a certain degree of activism. So we're so blessed to partner with a lot of incredible social organizations over the years, doing everything from joining President Obama's campaign to end bullying against Asian American students to raising money to bring more awareness about the disparity rates that Asian American women face when it comes to cancer.
And I was not even aware of that second campaign. I knew of the work you had done about bullying. So it's great to know about that. So let's tell everybody about the other two gentlemen.
So the lead singer, Ken Shima, he's the gentleman on the left in that particular photo. He's an incredible Japanese-American singer who came to us through the world of musicals, actually. He went to college specifically to study the arts, and his dream was to perform in musical theater. What ended up happening, he went to LA, joined a theater, but learned that oftentimes that door was closed to him before he even had a chance to jump on stage. Because if you want to audition for roles like Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, and they see an Asian face, oftentimes there aren't any roles for you. He couldn't actually play characters unless he was in excessive makeup to cover up who he was. And so with that kind of experience, he returned back to Portland, Oregon, just wanting to find something where he didn't feel like he had to hide. And so he actually joined my band at the time, which was looking for a new lead singer. The gentleman on the right is Joe Jang. He's my guitarist and kind of my main collaborator, especially these days. We've been writing a lot of songs and performing together. The band has kind of retired a bit. Like we start playing long tours in terms of like a full band experience. But Joe and I have been touring across the country, playing acoustic shows. He almost always joins me whenever I do speaking at events because I like to incorporate live music into my talks. And so he's been an amazing collaborator. And then all three of us now are actually a part of a new nonprofit that we started called the Slants Foundation, where we kind of work to provide resources and mentoring to Asian American artists who want to incorporate activism into their work. So those who've kind of pay attention to the world of Asian American culture know that during COVID-19, there's been an unprecedented level of attacks against Asian Americans, all kinds of physical violence and discrimination. And so on top of that, artists have suffered greatly under the pandemic, losing out on their main sources of income, like performing. And so we decided to put together a series of grants to help support the artists who are creating great work that wanted to counter hate using art. So in other words, creating artistic works, be it music or poetry or a visual art, to basically evoke compassion and to spark discussions about our cultures instead of things that simply call people out and provoke anger and defensiveness.
I'm seeing on your site, theslants.com, we're seeing our core values include amplify underrepresented voices, especially those among the Asian American community, focus on controversial and timely issues through social justice lens, challenge conventional thinking in terms of creating social change. So that'll bring us up to the name. Let's talk about the name. Let's get that out of the way. I can see people in the comments are losing their minds a little bit. So even I sometimes hesitate when I tell your story because of the name itself. And it's sort of timely that we're talking because we're in the middle of talking about names and names that need changing, like the Washington football team. So we'll get to that, but let's talk first about the Slants. What is the name? I mean, we can all guess the origin of the name, but tell us the story of the name and how the heck you ended up in the Supreme Court with a court case named after you.
Sure. So the name actually started because I was having a conversation with some of my white friends in Portland. I said, I knew I wanted to start this band, and I wanted to start this band about that celebrated Asian American culture. So I started asking them. I said, "What's something you think all Asian people have in common?" And almost all of them said the same thing. They said slanted eyes, which I thought was interesting because that was one of the main things that got me bullied as a kid. I was constantly attacked verbally, emotionally, physically for having these eyes, for having this face. And I knew because Asian Americans are some of the most bullied kids in America that there were other people who shared that experience as well. And I always associated my eyes with a sense of shame and embarrassment. So I thought, what if we injected pride into this? What if we flipped the stereotype around and instead took control of that conversation? So that's when the idea for the Slants was born. We thought this could be a term that we could use as a sense of empowerment instead. This is something that artists have been doing for many, many decades. And we certainly weren't the first people to use slant in this kind of reappropriated manner. We just happened to be the first rock and roll band to do so. And so that was kind of the genesis behind that people shouldn't be afraid or ashamed of the shape of their eyes, and that we could use this as kind of a springboard to have these more nuanced discussions on race. So for example, when people would ask me, if they got a little uncomfortable with the name, they would say well, why is that the name of your band? It kind of gave me a doorway to say, why do you feel uncomfortable with talking about this? Why is this the racial stereotype that you think of? Why do you think of Asian Americans when why is it an issue for Asians to use this name, but say non-Asian band? Most people wouldn't even think of it being an issue. So it really kind of generates a lot of provocative discussions about race, identity, who gets to control language, and so on.
And then so tell us the way you ended up in the Supreme Court. How did that go from the name to where you ended up in the Supreme Court? And folks, if you're just watching, I'm sorry to make him so much smaller there. Please tag your friends, tell them that they should meet Simon. Even if they can't join us now, they can join us later. Please tag. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. He's at Simon the Tam on Twitter. And you can find us on all 4 platforms right now, and they can watch it later. Simon is a good friend. A couple of years ago, when I wanted to teach people how to speak in public, I asked Simon to teach us, and he came to do a workshop called Rock the Mic, and he rocked that event. We had such a great time. And then a year later, we found ourselves in the most unusual kind of mix of people at a First Amendment conference in Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about that later. It had right-wing people, us. It had people who had gotten in trouble for speaking their truths, and it was a fascinating day-long conference. And Simon was one of the headliners and was performing, and I had such a great time. Was there with our friend Liza Donnelly, the New Yorker cartoonist. We had a great time. So Simon's going to tell us the story how the name Simon Tam became part of a Supreme Court case, a court case that eventually became a Supreme Court case, and how they won that. So Simon, I'm going to give you extended time to tell us that story.
I'll try and compress the 8 years into something a little more compact than that. So basically, we had been performing as the Slants for a couple of years, working with a number of racial justice organizations across America, kind of doing anti-bullying work and that sort of thing. And around that time period, it was actually kind of after we appeared on NPR's All Things Considered. Like they did this huge profile story talking about our band, which was turning stereotypes about Asian Americans upside down. And around that time period, I became friends with an intellectual property attorney who says, you know what, Simon, you should register your trademark. Like the Slants should be a registered trademark because this is something that's normal for artists to do. I didn't really think a whole lot about it. I was just like, sure, I guess I'll trust you. So we applied. A couple of months later, we got a response from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The examining attorney had actually rejected our application. And they said it was because of this old law called Section 2A of the Lanham Act that basically says you can't register trademarks that are considered scandalous, immoral, or disparaging. But it's not just what anyone considers to be disparaging. They say that they have to find what's called a substantial composite of the reference group to deny a registration under the name. And so as I was talking to my attorney, I was like, who did they find who was actually offended by this? And he says, no one. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean no one? You just told me that the law says they have to find like a whole bunch of people. He says, no one, but they did quote urbandictionary.com, which is, for those not familiar, it's a wiki joke website. And of course, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And so we decided to fight this thing. We challenged it, and we fought in the traditional way that anyone who was refused a registration under this law would fight. We provided numerous examples, mostly testimonies from our community. So national Asian American leaders stood up on our behalf. Many organizations, we demonstrated how every single Asian American newspaper, TV show, radio show, blog, and podcast in the country supported our use of the name. And on top of that, how we were doing anti-racism work on behalf of the US government. Well, they doubled down and they continued to reject it. So finally we said, hold on a second, why us? Why? If slant is this inherent racial slur that you claim it is, how come you gave it to 800 other people? You see, everyone else who applied for some kind of trademark on slant got it. So we were like, what's the problem with this band? And that's when the government told us it was because we were too Asian to use the trademark. In other words, they said if you look up the words the Slants and you see a bunch of Asian faces, you're going to automatically think racial slur instead of any other definition in the dictionary, which is basically a more convoluted way of saying anyone could have registered the Slants as long as they were not Asian. So in the name of fighting against racism, they denied us our rights because we were Asian. And so we decided to combat using the strongest kind of argument you can in this country, which is a constitutional argument that led us to the federal courts, where we won kind of a astounding victory. And even after that, the government continued to press that fight. They sued, took me to the Supreme Court, where we went before the justices in the highest court of the land. And at the United States Supreme Court, they ruled unanimously in our favor, saying that the law actually was violating my First Amendment rights, so freedom of expression. And it became this kind of a wonderful kind of spark to have all these conversations about racial equality, who gets affected and how are they affected by our laws, and also where that role of freedom of speech lies when it comes to things like trademarks. Earlier you mentioned kind of one of the more high-profile cases, and that's of the Washington football team, because there is certainly a lot of controversy there. A number of incredible Native American activists were filing to try and get their trademark registrations canceled and using the same law. So it just shows how the law itself can be kind of complex, used in a lot of different ways, both to harm and protect people.
Thank you. I'm looking at this photograph here. Tell us about that day. Was it a single day? Was it multiple days? What was it like to go to the Supreme Court? And normally when we see photos of the Supreme Court, it's like lots of signs and crazy stuff going on. What was it like that day? Was there other bigger cases on the docket? What was going on, and what was going through your mind as you were dealing with everything? I don't know if this photo was taken that day, but
it was taken that morning, early. It was surreal. I mean, it's just the weirdest experience. So what's not shown in this particular photo is there was a line to get in that was several blocks long. And, you know, those DC blocks are not by any means small. And in fact, there were people who had lined up since midnight the night before to try and get into the arguments on our case, because our case that year was one of the most talked about cases that the Supreme Court heard. That particular day, I mean, I was just filled with nerves. Even though I was not the one arguing, and in no way was I able to argue, I was just so tied to this case. I mean, I had been fighting for 8 years. So there was a lot of like personal feelings about it. And it's kind of funny because you kind of have these ideas of what it's going to be like in the courtroom. And I think it's kind of driven by all the movies we see. You imagine someone who's just like passionately arguing, like, but you don't understand, this is the truth. And somehow and somewhere that passion gets through. And I remembered for years leading up to that point, I would have dreams, I would fantasize about that. Like maybe one of the justices would recognize that it was me and say like, hey, what do you have to say? And I would get up and say all the things that I wish I could say, all the things that can't be contained in a legal document, that aren't necessarily like legal arguments, but they're moral ones, they're ethical ones, and what ought to be done. Of course, that didn't happen. I mean, that's just the way things are.
But just so that people understand that you can always speak for yourself in a criminal defense law case, right? Here,
right.
You have to be admitted to the bar at the Supreme Court to be able to speak, and there was no way you could have argued this even if you had wanted to. Is that correct?
Correct, and that's the irony of it. I'm like fighting for freedom of speech in the nation's highest court, and in that room, I cannot say a thing. And I think it's symbolic in so many ways of like how our laws sometimes don't necessarily serve those most affected. In fact, there was this kind of like weird interaction I had because we walked into that courtroom fairly early. They wouldn't actually let us sit near the attorneys. There's like, the attorneys are arguing from two tables right up by the diocese where the justices sit. Behind them are rows and rows of chairs that they reserve only for people admitted to the bar of the Supreme Court. So mostly like lawyers and law professors and the like. After that are rows and rows of pews. We get seated in the second row of those pews, but like as people are filing in, they see 4 young Asian guys in suits sitting up front. So they're like, oh, this must be the band. And all this whispering happens. You hear finger pointing, all this commotion before court's in session. And so someone signals for the court marshal. And they're like, hey, and they point to me and they're like, this is Tam of the case being argued today. This is the Tam. Doesn't he at least get to sit in the front row of the section? And he says like, well, I got to go check with the Solicitor General. That's the highest ranking attorney in the country. The Solicitor General is who we're arguing against that day. So he leaves. 10 minutes later, he comes back. He looks at me and he says, I'm sorry, sir, but we're reserving the seat in case someone important shows up today. And I was just like, oh my, like, that's just, what he just did there was the perfect illustration of how I've been feeling for almost a decade, trying to fight this thing, trying to fight for the dignity of just being able to choose what's right for my own self, for my own community, to have a stake in that conversation. But never in that entire time could we have, because, that's the funny thing. The government kept saying, oh, you're offensive to Asian people, you're offensive to Asian people, but never once did they bother talking to a single, like they didn't talk to a single Asian organization about it. In fact, nearly every major Asian American legal entity in the country filed amicus briefs in support of my case. So it was like, if you actually looked at the surveys, if you talk to academic professionals and activists, they would all say that they were in our corner. So how could you make these claims? But of course, like kind of mentioned with my not being able to represent myself, our entire community was not able to represent ourselves. You had every single justice and all the attorneys making these arguments and talking about what was offensive to Asian people, and the only Asian people in the room were not allowed to say anything about the matter because they knew better.
You know, I've talked to you multiple times, but we've never heard this in detail. It's so fascinating. Set the scene for us. Who are the 9 justices there that day? Or who do you still remember from that day, where they were seated? Were they all there? How did that go? And,
yes.
Yeah.
There were actually 8 of them because Antonin Scalia had just died not long before that. Gorsuch had been appointed, but he hadn't started yet. So it was just the 8 of them. So we had Chief Justice Roberts, we had Kennedy, Breyer, Sotomayor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course, Kagan. I'm missing one.
Clarence Thomas and
Clarence Thomas was the other.
And you also had oh goodness, the other arch conservative who's there. I'm forgetting one, but anyway, you had them all there, and you were there and experiencing all this. The court case name changed, right? The name was Lee versus Tam, and then it changed to Matal versus Tam. So explain who Lee and Matal are.
So Michelle K. Lee was the director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and she was kind of in charge at the time when our case was going up. But what ended up happening was, our case was argued 2 days before Trump received the inauguration ceremony to become president. And so during the transition of his administration stepping in, there was turnover at the trademark office. So Michelle Lee stepped down, and the interim director at the time was a guy named Joseph Matal. And so he stepped in, and because he was the acting director when the court issued the opinion, they changed the name because it was just the director versus me, essentially. And
he had a choice, right? Could he have stopped it there, or was it too late? Could he have said, I don't want to be in this fight. I don't want my name to be associated with something that I don't believe in. If he felt that way, could he have done that?
Yeah, it was too late. That ship had sailed. He basically inherited the case because all the arguments were done. Everything had been filed. It was too late to withdraw. What I found out later from one of his colleagues, because I actually spoke at his alma mater, was that he was actually a supporter of our side of things. But that's kind of what happens. And same thing with some of the people involved at the trademark office. They're like, well, it's kind of our job. We have to defend this law, whether we kind of believe in it or not, because that's our job. And so there's a lot of ironies with this particular thing. And I know there were a lot of folks who were concerned because they thought, they thought maybe my case would be one to kind of be the floodgate for hate speech, that all kinds of awful things would be registered as trademarks, and that it would actually be very damaging to people of color. But
has that happened?
What's that?
Has that happened?
No. There were, out of the 300,000 trademarks that were registered the following year, about 11 were kind of controversial or so-called disparaging. But when you actually look down into the details, they were all filed by people of color who were reappropriating terms to kind of bring on more nuanced discussions. And in particular, they were mostly from artists and small business owners, which is what I've been saying all along, that we needed the equal footing. Because, if you think about it, this law was written in the height of the Jim Crow era. It wasn't written to protect people like us. And, I was not the only person who was considered too Asian to register the mark. Every single person from various backgrounds, whether they're LGBTQ or other people of color, other racial, ethnic groups, they all try and reappropriate things. That's something that artists do all the time. But whenever a person of color applied, they were swiftly rejected. Yet applicants who of a different race oftentimes kind of got the benefit of the doubt. So that's why every single racial slur you could think of was a registered trademark, like on the books. But whenever Asian people applied, we were denied, just like me.
All right. We have so much to talk to Simon about, including his tips on being a speaking superstar. You can see how great he communicates here. And he's done 13 TEDx talks. I've only done 5, so I've got a long way to go to catch up to him. It's a world record.
It's not a competition, and you certainly have quite a mastery. You're a great speaker.
Thank you. That's very kind. So we're going to get some of his tips in a few minutes, but let's go through the comments that are coming in. Brooklyn says, thank you, Simon Tam. And he's saying, be why science, music, art, and emotion combine to see what is right and what is wrong. James Barud says, hi. And Brooklyn says, if this is not clear enough, then what is a crime? He's talking about the name, I guess. And to see that, we didn't get the end of the story, though. I shouldn't have, forced you to stop. So, by the way, Samuel Alito, we want to make sure we shout out the arch conservative on the court. He, along with Clarence Thomas, are the extreme right-wing position on the court now. So what happens? They go through many cases and then many verdicts and then come to your judgments. Is that what's the right terminology? And then they come to you?
They issue their opinion, but they don't do it that day. They do it many months later. And what ends up happening is, like, the more controversial or kind of high profile cases, the court tends to save for summer, like towards the end of the term. So every Monday and Wednesday, which are the days of the week where they issue opinions, I would get up at 6 a.m. I'd jump on Twitter, I'd look at the news and be like, what did they say? Finally, on June 19th, 2017, so, coincided with Juneteenth, actually, I wake up, my phone is blowing up. I had 700 missed notifications. I'm like, I guess something happened. I checked Twitter, and Oregon Public Broadcasting, the NPR affiliate in Oregon, which is actually the first national media that broke the story about the Asian American band that was defying stereotypes. They wrote in a single tweet, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Slants. And later that day, I found out that decision was unanimous. Every single justice signed on. And what a feeling of relief, because it was finally over.
Tell us about the expenses that you had to go through. How did you, some of it was, I hope, paid for by folks, and talk about that.
So the legal team generously had been working pro bono for the majority of the time. So that was taken care of. But there's I had to take care of the hard legal fees, court fees, and that kind of thing. And for folks who aren't aware, the government likes doing things a very, very certain way. And if you don't follow that way, you kind of get in trouble. But one of those ways is they have very particular printers that they like to use. You have to use something called an appellate printer so that all the documents are in a particular format. That process is not cheap. I mean, I would get bills of tens of thousands of dollars for printing. And so it was extremely brutal. I took on a job after job, had side hustles. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I started traveling as a speaker, because I knew that was a way I could generate some income. I had to actually step down from being a full-time musician to pay for the legal bills to fight this particular case. So that's kind of how it all happened. And then it wasn't until that we got to the Supreme Court that a foundation helped take care of some of the more arduous, more difficult legal bills that were just like placing that burden. But a lot of it was on credit cards, and some of them I just paid off like fairly recently. So, I mean, just years and years. The thing is, if I didn't have the generosity of the law firms that supported me, and groups like the ACLU and Cato Institute and all these other organizations, the case probably would have cost in excess of $1 or $2 million just to fight.
Amazing. Did you ever think of giving up or quitting?
All the time. I mean, how could I not? Like it cost me everything. It not only did I have to walk away from my band for a period of time because I couldn't afford to be a musician anymore. I had band members and some of my closest friends walk away because they said we signed up to be in a band, not to be in this lawsuit. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was just constantly thinking about it. And in fact, the most difficult time is as we're approaching the federal court, and the expenses were just getting so much, and just all the printing fees were just kind of staggering. I started skipping meals. I just said, I can only afford to eat like 7 meals a week. I had to basically drop 2/3 of my ability to eat because I just couldn't afford it anymore. And it was really difficult. It was really tough for my family, like my parents, to kind of see me go through this experience. In fact, the day that I got the decision, when phone calls and everything were pouring in, I'll never forget that in the middle of that day, I called my mom, and she's like, oh, she tells me in Mandarin, she's like, gong xi, like, congratulations. I heard that you won. And I was like, yeah, I finally won. And she's just like, good. I hope you can be happy. I hope I can see you smile again. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's just like, well, you used to just always be so happy. You used to always see you joking around. But like, I want my son back. And so I hope now that it's over, I can have my son back. And it was just, heartbreaking. I didn't even realize like the toll it was taking, and how much it was just sucking out parts of my soul to like fight this thing. But, in the end, I just realized like it's still worth it. And I actually spent a lot of time speaking at law conferences and to legal groups, and law students in particular are interested in that. And they're always like, how much did it cost? How much did it cost? And I'm like, the real cost of doing what's right, or the cost of following your dreams, is not actually what you have to sacrifice in order to chase those dreams and to follow your values. The real cost is what you pay when you don't like have integrity, when you don't actually follow your dreams. And so I realized I had to keep going, because like I knew I had a chance to make a difference. I saw how the law was impacting people, especially people of color. How could I walk away from that? And so that's why I kept pressing forward, no matter what it took. I knew I had to do something to highlight the inequitable law, and to highlight the importance of allowing freedom of expression, and for artists in particular.
Well, thank you for doing that. We are so glad that you were able to see that through. Now we don't have a lot of time left, but we have lots of comments and questions and all of that I want to show you. Let's see. Yois says, "Strive Together" sounds amazing. That's your new organization that you're already working there, but you're moving from Nashville to Cincinnati for, and this is great. So you can say you're already doing your promotional work for them. He also saw the film that my sponsor had, and he said it's Waterworks. He watched it, a good film, he says. And Digital Night says, have a good show. And Fernando wasn't sure if you guys were real. I guess the Slants were real. And then says, wow, I remember that NPR interview, the first one. And then, of course, when you won the case. Mark is watching from Durham, North Carolina. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking to Simon Tam, who's a musician, activist, and he has a name on a Supreme Court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won the right to appropriate a name that was used by bullies his whole life. And now their band's name, the Slants, is something that he has proudly reappropriated, as we see a lot of artists and musicians doing. Let's talk for a second about the Washington football team and what's going on there. Just this week, they announced that it'll be just called the Washington football team until they come up with a name, because it is hard to they had 10 years of attention on this, and Daniel Schneider, who is known as someone who is not at all interested in changing this, was forced to. And this is one of the side effects and positive side effects of the killing of George Floyd, this awareness of the importance of treating everyone better. We're seeing that, and it's this is the only reason that we're in that position, because as recently as 2 years ago, they said they would not be changing the name, and they're changing the name. So tell me about what you understand of the case of the Washington football team. And then I want to get your tips on public speaking like a rock star. Here is a photograph from the time you and I did a workshop on Rock the Mic. And there you are. People can see me, but there you're sitting down in this photograph. These are pictures from our friend Stefan Kaplan at Spin It Social, and these were some of the tips you were giving. So this is just a preview. We'll come back to you to give us these particular tips, but let's Give us your sense of what's going on with the Washington football team, which of course is known as the Redskins for so many years, and now finally they are dropping the name.
Yeah, I mean, they're finally changing their name, and it's all thanks to the proactive work of and very persistent work of a number of Native American activists and their allies. So for a long time, there have been a number of strategies that were developed to try and get the team to change their name. Some of it was a public awareness. So there were football commercials that kind of said that, like, basically were saying like that, how calling it out for what it was, a racial slur. And there was also another lawsuit that paralleled mine. So a number of activists tried to sue the team to try and get them to get the trademark office to cancel the team's registration. Ultimately, that would have proven to be kind of more of a symbolic victory, because had the government canceled their trademarks, the team would not have been forced or inclined to change their name. In fact, they would still have their trademark protections. And ultimately, that lawsuit failed because of, in large part because of my case, and then another case after mine called In Re Brunetti, where they struck down all aspects of the Lanham Act that were basically on the premise that they were viewpoint discrimination. That being said, the conversations continued in the most important places in the marketplace. And when, as you mentioned, there's been this huge wave of conversations around racial justice started bubbling up, especially in the last month, 2 months, on kind of a broader level. Companies were compelled to provide statements of how they supported Black Lives Matter or diversity inclusion. And the team's major sponsors, Nike and FedEx in particular, basically threatened to pull all their money. And that's when the team realized that, oh, money talks, and they wanted to basically make sure that they could appease the sponsors. So they decided to have that conversation to finally change the name. And so, I'm thrilled to see that happen, and I'm so glad to see it happening in a way that doesn't involve the government, because I think if we give the government the power to kind of make those decisions, we'll probably find ourselves in situations that we don't necessarily want, where someone else has that sense of power in controlling what we get to say is right or wrong. And so, like many places, like the marketplace of ideas ultimately won out. And, I love quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who also oftentimes would appropriate this quote from Thomas Poehler. He said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I always remind folks that, that moral arc doesn't bend on its own. It requires patience, it requires persistence, and it requires people who not only understand their rights, but who are willing to fight for them, no matter what that cost might be.
And you have lived those words, and you really, as you were speaking, by the way, I was thinking about those words, about the moral arc of justice. That's something that President Obama used to always.
I think he was in the Oval Office at the time. I think he had the words engraved somewhere. But it's so true. And for my friends who had been fighting so long to kind of change that mascot, I'm just so thrilled for them, because I know it was a really long, heartbreaking journey. And many of those activists receive death threats and constant threats of violence to them and their family. I mean, they really just put their lives on the line because of the same kind of ideas of dignity. Like, they just wanted the right to decide for themselves what was right, and not have someone else say, "Oh, this is an honorific," when in fact they didn't feel that way at all.
And as you know, it was run by a racist. Actually, had put that name on the team in the first place, and that was one of the things. I've seen it with my own eyes. On Monday on the show, we had a conversation with a young woman who was looking at changing the name of some of the products inside Trader Joe's. They have this Trader Arabian Joe and Trader Joe San and Trader Jose, and of course some people laugh it off as people will. But this young girl, she's 17 years old. She started a petition, and with only 2,000, 3,000 signatures, Trader Joe's came out and said, "We are working on it. So we got this. Don't worry about it." Right. So that means they have given up and saying, "Okay, we'll change it." But that wasn't good enough for all these bullies, like all these racists come out and say, "Why you're the racist by pointing this out. No one else is complaining." And it went on and on and on. So I couldn't, and I was getting some of that blowback because I had her on this show. And this is not, This is not like putting her on CNN or something.
Yeah.
So I can imagine what her life must have been like, or what your life was like when you fight for moral justice or for things of great clarity. There are people who will fight you for no reason, even after the company agreed. So there are now people, we see them online, who are such devoted fans of this racist name, the Redskins, who are willing to fight to keep that name, even when the team, which is run by a guy who didn't care and who loved the name in the first place, he's agreed, and they're more, they're bigger defenders of this than the team itself. It's so hard to understand. We have only a little bit left. I do want to take advantage of your being here, sharing some of your thoughts on being a great public speaker as you are. So first, tell us what's under that jacket that you're wearing on screen. What are we looking at? What does that say? If you open that jacket, what would it say underneath?
It says Chinatown Swagger, and it's actually a phrase from an incredible documentary called Nine Man about this sport that's played in the courts of New York City. So I just love the phrase. I was like, oh, this really kind of embodies my spirit.
I like that. And so what we'll do is we have 4 photos here from our friend Stefan Kaplan. So let's just, instead of trying to get you to do everything, talk a little bit about your best tips and speak to the 3 other photographs. But let's remind people, this was a show, a workshop that you and I ran. Joey Chen was also there, the great CNN anchor, and she did a session on interviewing, and you did the session on public speaking like a rock star by a rock star in your case. So set this up for us, and then let's walk through the other 3 photographs.
I think, what a rock star is known for: passion, energy, and a performance, and of course, an unparalleled ability to captivate an audience. And I think those are the qualities of any great speaker. You got to be able to connect with an audience, and you got to use your passion to do it. So a lot of my ideas about public speaking don't necessarily come from public speaking courses. They come from performing as a musician, like, being able to do it with authenticity, being able to do it in a way that people can't help but watch what's happening or can't help but listening. So that's kind of how I got started in this whole thing. And the irony, of course, is when I took public speaking in college a number of years ago, I thought it was the worst experience ever. I was like, I'm never going to do this. And here I am now, doing it all the time, whether it's in person. Last year I did 180 events. I released a memoir about my life experiences. So I was touring the circuit in bookstores and conventions. And now, of course, we're doing a lot of these virtual kinds of events. But that's where a lot of those ideas come from.
All right. So let's look at find your purpose.
So I believe that people should be driven by their values, and more than anything else, it's kind of like Simon Sinek's idea of like, start with why. Figure out the things that drive you, your inner self. That ultimately moves the needle more than anything else. Instead of focusing on the what or the kind of hows of doing things, like focus on that why. And so for folks who are interested in doing like a TED Talk or TEDx talk, like figure out why is it that you want to get that message out. If your sole reason for getting on a TED stage is because you want attention, then I oftentimes say you've already failed. Like figure out what it is that you're trying to create in terms of change in the world, and use that value to motivate you. And I think that will actually ultimately change how you speak and how you connect with folks, because they'll be able to see much more of an authentic passion behind your ideas.
Thank you, Simon. We've got 2 more, so let's go to those. The next one is the best ideas ignite.
So this is kind of like Seth Godin's idea that the best ideas will win. That in this case, they will spark that conversation, and they'll spark something in other people. I think great ideas should not be held on to for ourselves, but they should be used as a way to actually spark change in the world. And I believe that folks who have that idea that's worth sharing, if you were to use Ted's phrase, is one that actually get people to think and reflect and maybe even change some kind of behavior in their hearts.
And that certainly works. And one more, the best ideas win.
At the end of the day, I mean, I'm a free speech advocate. I believe that, when you want to counter hate, the best method of doing so isn't censorship. It is providing better ideas, more nuanced ideas, ideas driven by compassion and love in this world, because that is how you win in terms of a long-term sustainable and creating long-term sustainable change in this world.
And that's so great. We should also point out how great your graphics are, and you don't fill your screen with text. Talk about that as a speaking device or a speaking methodology.
Well, I'm like, if you're a public speaker, you want people to pay attention to you, not your slides. Like, if people are reading a screen, they have a hard time listening to the speaker. So I just try and condense things down as much as possible. Also, as you can see, I wear like very thick glasses. I have trouble seeing. So if I'm like in the back row and I can't tell what's going on, you're already losing me. So I'm like, I've already been PowerPointed to death so many times, especially in college, with bullet point after bullet point. We don't need that. We just need some kind of image that is supporting that idea so that people hang on to the words you say.
I love that. So hang on to the words you say rather than try to decipher what's on the screen. I think that's a great way for us to think about this.
If you're going to put everything you're going to say on the screen, they can just go out and have the PDF or a copy of the slide deck sent to them. That's the funny thing. When I do like legal training, it's part of the requirement that they get the copy of the slide deck. And I'm always like, you can have it, but it's not really good. Like it's not going to mean anything.
Right. We have such little time left. I wanted to walk through a couple of photographs that we have of you, and tell us about this day in your life.
One of the best moments I've ever had. This was my wedding day. I got to marry this amazing, beautiful, talented artist, Faina Laura. And so that's us walking through the Lansu Chinese Gardens in Portland, Oregon. Beautiful.
Look at that. And it's a beautiful day. And look at this, very dramatic. This looks like from a movie scene. Who are these guys?
Those are my groomsmen, and they're all connected to me via my band. The gentleman on my right is Alex. He's my publicist, who's been supporting my work since 2006. To my left are Jonathan and Tyler, two very long-standing members in the Slants.
Excellent. And let's take a look. Yeah, these are beautiful pictures. Let's give a shout out to the photographer, if you remember.
Oh, thank you. This is Britta Marie, was the photographer for the wedding.
Nice. These are great pictures. You obviously have understood how to package. You've got great content, but you also have to use images. Tell me about the power of images in the work you do as a musician. You're used to performing, speaking, and on big stages. Where does performance and art and images all combine? Where do they combine?
Well, I like to say that you try and get people to engage on with multiple senses. And obviously, since so many people are actually visual learners, they take in information just as a gut reaction based on imagery. So that's why I love using bold, dramatic imagery, both in terms of how I portray my band, but also when I speak and use slide decks, because people can get so much more information, and perhaps it's even information that you're just trying to get out there to lead to a much bigger point of what you're trying to do. So imagery is so much a part of that, just like speaking and hearing and feeling and touching and so on.
And this is, of course, that day at the Supreme Court, and that looks like another memorable day for you. Before we just say goodbye, I want to tell people that I really do want to play music from Simon, but one of the things we've discovered, Simon, is that even if I have the musician on with us, the way YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all deal with music copyright, they keep dinging us even when we have permission from the musician. It's not always your permission, right? Because you don't have, you might, but not all musicians have copyright to their music. And so during the pandemic, Facebook and YouTube told us that because machines are now in charge instead of people, we won't be able to override some of the machine copyright claims. So watch out. And that's turned out to be the case, even when we're producing shows like this with lots of musicians, and we've run into that issue. I could have probably gotten away with having you here, but the machines don't care, isn't it?
You know what? They tag it on my band's own channel. I get flagged, and they're like, "This is." I'm like, it's mine. Here's the copy of the copyright, but the machine doesn't read that, so it takes months and months sometimes to get my own music videos online.
Yeah, so I want everybody to go to the slants.com and listen to your music, purchase your music, go to Spotify and listen wherever. Just remind us, where is it that musicians making the most money when people go online? Is it on Pandora, or at least bad in terms of the deals for you? Because buying, isn't it true? Like buying a full album on iTunes is still the best, and then it goes down and down from there. Am I wrong?
It depends on the musician. So if they have a Bandcamp page, that usually goes directly to the musician. And during this time period, Bandcamp is actually waiving all of their fees, so musicians get 100% of the proceeds.
Nice.
And in terms of like my band, I would just ask folks like, rather than giving to us, give to our nonprofit. It's tax deductible, and we get to help support other up and coming musicians who are creating work. So they can do that at theslants.org. That's the foundation website.
Theslants.org. So definitely check that out. Simon, I'm going to let you go. One of the things that we are doing today is, one of my friends, by the way, is in Singapore, and it's his 50th birthday. And I'm after, as soon as this is done, I'm going to jump over there to say hello to him and wish him a happy birthday. But tell us what's on your pin right there on your lapel.
Well, this is it's a book cover. This is actually an illustration someone made of Harry Potter with Hedwig, his owl. So,
oh, okay, very cool. When do you leave for
in the books?
When do you leave for Cincinnati?
In about 2 weeks, so it's coming up very, very quick, and I can't wait.
And how long is the drive from Nashville?
It's about 4 hours.
Okay.
So it's not too bad.
That's not bad at all. We wish you the very best. Please stay safe through all the COVID and everything else. And your energy, your positivity is so inspiring to me. Every time we've met, whether it's in a small setting, the way we were at that workshop, or on that giant stage with thousands of people with us, as we were at that event at Duquesne University. There were Martin Barron from the Washington Post, Dean Baquet from the New York Times. All kinds of folks were there, left, right.
Also, Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined us by video.
That's right. Right. It was quite the day, and really inspiring. And I was thrilled to see you perform in front of all of us, as you gave a kind of talk and performance at the same time. I don't. If there's video of it, I will share it, because it was quite well done, as always. Thank you, Simon the Tam, at Simon the Tam. Please follow him, and we wish you the very best. If you're up for it, we'll have you back to talk about Strive together once you're settled in down the road in Cincinnati. So thanks very much, Simon.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye. What a great guy, folks. Please follow him at Simon the Tam, and check out theslants.com and theslants.org. You saw when I said, how can people support him and his band? He said, support the foundation instead. What a great guy. Simon, he's not Simon the Tam, he's at Simon the Tam. Simon Tam, great guy, and a wonderful inspiration for all of us. How many of us can do all that he did and fight through all that he did in becoming someone who had his court case won at the Supreme Court and bending that moral arc of justice? Okay, as always, before we go, we want to thank everyone who's watching, and also to do something that we have been doing on this show, because Kimberly Crenshaw, the professor who coined the term intersectionality, told me to do so. When I asked, what can allies do to support Black folks? She said, say their names. And so we're going to do that in just a minute. And we want to thank all of you for joining us, and want to remind you of what's coming up on this show. Tomorrow night, Jamie Metzel will be here. Jamie will be here for our positivity night. If you thought Simon was a positive guy, you wait till you see Jamie, positive and energetic, just like Simon. And we do that every Sunday. I'm always looking for speaker ideas, folks. Let us know. We're well past 250 speakers on the show, and we have no plans to stop. So that's tomorrow night. And then on Monday, we go back to Portland for Portland in Crisis. We'll meet the publisher of The Scanner, a leading African-American newspaper in Portland. And we will hear about the unprecedented turmoil caused by the federal government, caused by the President of the United States that's happening there. We have other great shows coming up this week that you won't want to miss. Make sure you email me, Sree@Sree.net, so we can hear from you as well. And then tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, Anthony DePalma will be here for my New York Times read-along. We read the New York Times out loud like crazy people for 5 years on Facebook Live. 22-year New York Times reporter and foreign correspondent will be here. And then at 11 a.m., I am honored to co-executive produce with my friends, Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina, She's on Call, a new show that will have an entire show dedicated to opening of schools. And Dr. Heather Kloss, an infectious diseases doctor, will be here. Dr. Sally Goza, the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And Donna Mazik will be here, registered nurse and executive director of the National Association of School Nurses. Now, let us say their names. We were at first saying their names through this image that you see on the left, the cover of Time magazine by Titus Kaffer. And on the right, a photograph you may not have seen of a young George Floyd with his mother, Larcinia Floyd. She would die 2 years, almost to the day before he was killed in Minneapolis. They're both now buried next to each other in Houston. And here are the names mentioned in the updated version of the Say Her Name report. Breonna Taylor, killed by police in her bed on March 13, 2020. Tatiana Jefferson, Charlena Siobhan Lyles, Corin Gaines, India Kager, Sandra Bland, Alexia Christian, Maya Hall, Megan Hockaday, Janisha Fonville, Natasha McKenna, Tanisha Anderson, Aura Rosser, Shanique Proctor, Michelle Cousseau, Pearlie Golden, Gabriela Navarez, Yvette Smith. Before I read the second column, think about how many of those names have you heard? Sure, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, but have you heard these other names? Renisha McBride, Miriam Carey, Chaim Livingston, Kayla Moore, Shelley Fry, Melissa Williams, Shulena Weldon, Alicia Thomas, Chantel Davis, Charmel Edwards, Rekia Boyd, Charisse Francis, Ayanna Stanley Jones, Tarika Wilson, Catherine Johnston, Alberta Spruill, Kendra James, Latanya Haggerty, Margaret Laverne Mitchell, Taisha Miller, Danette Daniels, Frankie Ann Perkins, Sanji Taylor, Eleanor Bumpers. Again, how many of those names have you heard? The fight for social justice, the fight against police brutality continues. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your feedback and suggestions for this show. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net. If you would like to collaborate on an episode or a series, please let us know. And now let's thank our sponsors once again. Muckrack Academy, Fundamentals of Social Media, a free certification course, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Also, Nunbelievable, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each box of handcrafted cookies provides 2 meals to those in need. 20% off with the code SREE. SREE at nunbelievable.com. Divinely delicious cookies on a mission. And
Hotstar Premiere Nights. Watch the year's biggest blockbusters streaming straight to your screen. Exclusively on Hotstar.
Hotstar Premiere Night kicked off this weekend with the world premiere of the new film Dil Bechara, starring the late Sushant Singh Rajput, with new music from Oscar winner A.R. Rahman. Streaming free on the platform right now. Hotstar brings you the newest Indian movies with subtitles, plus entertainment, cricket, live news channels, and more. Hotstar.com/US. Please check them out. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate you so much.